This screencast is going to walk you through lesson number 2 of our percents, fractions, and decimals part of our unit. And this particular lesson is going to look at percents and fractions. So if you look over here at under the essential question, it's talking about when is it better to use a fraction, a decimal, or a percent. In certain questions, you're going to understand and see that it's going to make more sense to have an answer be written as a fraction or as a decimal or even as a percent. Today our main vocabulary word is going to be the word percent because we are looking at percents and fractions. We've looked at fractions before and we looked at how fractions can be written as a part to a whole relationship. Now we're going to look at how can we change fractions into percents and percents into fractions. If you go ahead and take a look at the real world link, it says that students were asked to choose their favorite sport to play. For each sport, shade a 10 by 10 grid that represents the number of students out of 100 that chose the sport. So if you take a look at the different examples, you have basketball, football, gymnastics, and swimming. If you look, you have a 100 cube grid, and this basketball score is currently only 3 out of 20. So you're going to need to think about how you would represent this fraction on a 100 square grid. Okay, so pretend that there were 100 students. Same thing for football, same thing for gymnastics. Swimming is going to be a little bit more simple just because it's already written 9 out of 100. Then you're going to take a look at number 2. And it says what fraction with a denominator of 100 represents the number of students who chose each sport. So you're going to write a fraction for basketball, a fraction for gymnastics, a fraction for football, and a fraction for swimming. You want to make sure that you read through this percents as fractions piece because it's going to highlight what a percent is. A percent is a ratio that compares a number to 100. For example, 45 out of 100 will be written as 45 over 100. Could be shown, like we saw in our inquiry lab, as 45 little squares shaded in, or if it's represented on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, a 10 part bar graph, you would shade in 4.5 of those squares. Right here is another important piece of information. It says to write a percent as a fraction. First, write the percent as a rate per 100 and then simplify. So go ahead and take a few minutes and look over the examples on this page and then fill out the got it section. You have another example up here, number 3, that talks about the table shows the percent of each movie type rented during a month. What fraction of the rentals were action movies? So the first thing you want to try and do is figure out what is the total percent. Is it actually 100% or is it less? And then out of that, look at the 35%. So 35% means out of 100. So you would write this as 35 over 100 and then simplify it down into simplest form. So go ahead and try part D, write the fraction of rentals that were horror movies. Once again, you want to make sure that that is in simplest form. The next part that we are going to look at is fractions as percents. To write a fraction as a percent, you're going to find an equivalent ratio with 100 as a denominator. So if you take a look, it says write the fraction 6/8 as a percent. You can see that 6/8 can be simplified down to 3/4, and then we can find something to multiply by 4 to get to 100. So they're walking you through this example, and they're showing you that you would get to 75 over 100. So 75 over 100, or 75% of the rectangle, would be shaded because 75% is equal to 3/4, which is equal to 6/8. Go ahead and try part E, write the fraction 9/12 as a percent. Flipping to the last page of your packet, you'll see that there's one more example that is kind of applying this to a real world scenario. It says Mitch made 12 out of 40 shots during the championship game. What percent of his shots did Mitch make? So if you look at 12 over 40, we know we can simplify that down to 3/10. 3/10 can then become something out of 100, which then becomes 30 out of 100. So 12/40 equals 30 over 100, or 30%. Once again, changing that fraction to a percent And especially if you're familiar with basketball or sports, a lot of times we see the idea of free throws or goals made, things like that, as a decimal or a percent. Go ahead and take a look at question F, under the Got It section. That says Alana spelled 19 out of 25 words correctly. What percent of the words did Alana spell correctly? Once you think you have your answer, then we're going to check that. And then you are going to work on the guided practice questions. So for 1, 2, and 3, you're going to write each percent as a fraction in simplest form. 4, 5, and 6, write each fraction as a percent. Number 7 gives you a word problem. Elsa ran 7 out of 10 days. What percent of the days did she run? And then number 8, why is it helpful to write a fraction as a percent?